We are live. You're live. Okay, let me check once. Hi, good morning, everyone.
Your life.
Welcome. Uh, Today we are. It's a busy Saturday morning. I think I got a chance to call Vidhi, and she agreed. It's my pleasure to host Vidhi. And let me give a brief introduction of what she is doing before we get into the session. So, Vidhi Chugh is a data scientist who is helping organizations across the globe, uh, helping them make smarter and more efficient business solutions and decisions. In the past, she has worked with Blue Yonder, Ericsson, and PwC. She also runs a successful blog where she breaks down various AI ML components and has been featured on Million STEM as an inspiration for the next generation. She is an advocate for responsible and ethical AI and promotes AI for social good. So it's a wonderful pleasure to have you here, Vidhi. And today she will cover on different aspects like how do we find out different components of AI solutions that can be patentable. What are the steps to patent a solution? I'm sure we have many people of us have developed new and novel components, algorithms, but do we know the process to patenting? So it's all Vidhi who has filed many patents and here us to guide on the steps. So welcome Vidhi once again and come and share your perspectives. What do you think? And before that, let me hear out from you. How do you started your data science journey, and then we'll go into patenting. Yeah,
Yeah,
Vidhi.
sure. Thanks, Shamishta, for the kind introduction. It's an honor sharing this space with you. Regarding my career, I carry more than a decade of experience in multiple domains. I've initially been a little more domain specific. I've covered telecom, then I studied in risk analytics for quite some time before moving to ad tech and supply chain. Apart from my day-to-day work, which is specific to designing data science solutions, I am also passionate about promoting the responsible and ethical use of AI and the diversity and inclusion. I want to see more women in STEM. So that's about me.
Yes, thanks, Vidhi. Thanks for your contributions in the data science community. So, since our topic is today patenting, so let's go into the straight into the topic. Like, how do we, from an entire solution, how when we pick components that are patentable?
Yeah. So actually, Shamishta, there are 2 points to it. One is from the organization level, and then another we can think from a developer perspective. So I'll just first cover what goes behind the scenes when an organization is promoting the innovation in the teams, right? So they need. It depends upon whether they encourage all the ideas that come through them, or they have a specific a focus area that it should be contributing to business and those ideas, and then they take it forward. The reason is very simple that there's a lot of cost benefit analysis that happens behind the scenes. Like there's huge cost involved with patenting the solutions and what is the benefit that they get out of it. And most of the times, if any particular innovative idea, it is it is only limited to the innovators, and only that person knows that innovation, right? Then there is not much incentive in taking it through the patent path, because first is that it could be the patenting is a long journey, so it takes around 4 to 5 years to get your patent filed, finally, the grant of the patent. So if your the innovation is a short product life cycle item, then this whole journey will take a lot of time. Plus, you have to disclose. You have to give the entire disclosure, the code, the working idea, so that anyone can actually implement it also. So whether or not how you get to know whether it's been copied somewhere, so it's a difficult journey that way. And in those cases, in fact, trade secrets is a term which is similar to protecting your idea, but you don't need to actually disclose the code, so you can choose that. So these are the thought processes that an organization follows when they promote innovation. And like in my entire career, I did not in the initial half of my career, I did not have this kind of exposure, and not all the companies actually have this setup. From the developer perspective, if I come, it basically what happens is that we need to just identify one of the things, that it's how to develop innovative bent of mind. So if you're given a problem statement, most of the times what we end up doing is that you have a problem statement and you immediately start assuming that this is the data, this is the ask, I'll build a KPI around it, there's an evaluation metric, and I'll simply run it through the pipeline to see how the numbers look like, how well the algorithm is doing as of now. And people generally resort to standard packages and libraries. Now, it is good for most of the run of the mill problem statement, I can say. But what generally happens is that when you end up doing that and your output is not meeting the business requirement, that that leaves a gap basically, and that gap is what we want to fill by bringing in the innovation piece. So that invention actually comes in when we do not have anything which already exists and can help me solve a business problem. So that's the first thing. I need to identify that what is it that is missing in the information available in public domain, which is not helping me get to a particular problem statement and the solution around it. So once we have a gap, we have a fillers also, and those fillers are the invention. And in order to achieve that, we need to know, for example, the first step should be list down all the possible ways you can solve that particular problem statement. It might not already exist. And while you're doing that, you will understand that what are the assumptions of
List
all
down
the
all the.
algorithms. Uh, Sorry, did you say something, Shamishna? Hello? Shamishna, am I audible? Shamishna, am I audible?
Sorry, sorry,
Shamishna, am
sorry.
I audible?
Yeah, yeah, you're audible. Yeah, my network bad. Yeah, go ahead, Vidhi, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So I was saying that generally the approach should be like this: when you, as soon as you're given a problem statement, have a thorough analysis on what the ask is, gather the requirements, understand what are the possible ways you can solve the problem statement. It could be just list down two or three possible ways, and we know that there is no one the only one solution in data science with which you can achieve it. So, for example, have your best bet first, and then try a couple of more as a backup plan. And while you're doing in this process, what you'll do is you'll have those some bit of assumptions. What are the limitations of each algorithm or the solution that you're designing? It could not be just something which is already available. So in the process, when you do that, you realize that I need to do some extra bit to make sure that it is now catering to the actual ask of the business. And in that process, now that you've identified, that is the first part. Identifying is the important part, that what is it that is missing, which is not already captured. And now how to develop that kind of intuition which
So I
helps
have a
you.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do I identify which is not captured? Is it from the perspective of business, or is it also perspective from the like what all patents or already exist in the market? We have to do a study on those, what things people have done, research papers. So it is very difficult to narrow down. Like many side things of things has been already being done. So how do we narrow it down and find out that be sure that there has nothing been done on this line?
Yeah, sure. So I think that one thing which I frequently do is I read a lot of research papers. So it could be so there are two things, that it could be available in public domain as such in terms of a package solution itself, which is what we resort to, like saying that I have a data, I pass it through random forest, and I have certain metrics and all if they meet it or not. So if it is following that path, then I think there is not much scope of doing anything beyond, right? If there is something that you need to customary design, then for that we already, like I generally do, is read through a lot of research papers that help me understand that something similar either already exists. Then the invention, I think, is restricted if I'm using it as is. Like if it exists and I need to implement it from my side, then there is not much scope of it unless I'm improving on the already existing invention. So that generally happens when you have a tendency to read through a lot of journals, or maybe keeping yourself up to date with the advancements that are happening, the technological advancements. And yeah, so the breadth is a lot, and it becomes difficult definitely to narrow down. But the more we are closer to solving the problem statement, the more you narrow down that particular way. For example, I listed there are three or four ways that you can in particular order solve a particular problem in a more efficient way. So efficient has to be in terms of, it could be it takes a lesser time, or maybe it is like you're preferring a more glass box model. You don't really want to build a deep neural network, and you want to put more emphasis on interpretability. So based on lot many criteria which is specific to the business problem that you're solving, you'll narrow it down first, and then within that genre you look for the similar work. So if it already exists, then the implementation is the last part. If it does not exist and still there is something which is an overlaying work that you need to do, that is where your invention will come into the picture.
And getting it, thanks Vidhi for highlighting those. But and the main question remains, like, the invention remains, but it's very expensive, this patenting, right? And I have a thought, like, I'm an individual or I'm a freelancer and I have a thought. So is there any cheap way that we can get these ideas or collaborate with anybody, like, getting the patents? Because I'm sure lots of people have many new ideas, right? And everybody doesn't get an opportunity to work in a very big organization where patenting is encouraged. So what is your thoughts, and how do you encourage them, that how do you identify the piece, what is unique, how do I get sure, and how do I proceed with it?
Yeah, sure. So actually, uh, first is that my exposure has been through the organization, my ex-employer, that's Blue Yonder, and I agree it's a very expensive process. Like thousands of dollars are spent in those legal counseling sessions. There is an entire team that does the content vetting for you. Something already exists or not. How much of the information disclosure is needed before you actually go to the patent office. So this is an expensive process, and I've never kind of done in my own individual capacity, so I might not be able to kind of give an exact answer on that, but I can definitely tell about how, if you are not directly associated with a big organization and you want to still have that kind of innovative mindset, then what is it that you should look for while you're designing a particular solution? So more often than not, you are still your ask is coming from a particular organization, whether or not it is into the patenting zone or not. So it is like the from wherever you're getting the ask, then when you're designing the solution, which all components you can actually look for and identify that there is a scope for filing a patent on this. Maybe I can help more on that. And the very first thing I can explain is that as part of data science fields, Shamishta, what comes very normal is the imposter syndrome. Every time that we do something, we feel like whatever I'm doing, maybe it is too trivial. The solution that I've designed, is it too obvious? And this definitely does not qualify for a patent, or this no one would even call it an innovation. Something like this would already exist. So when these kind of things happen, I can actually help people go past that and explain with examples how they can identify these things. These are actually the opportunistic areas, so they contribute a lot. And one of the thing is that we should not wait for the entire working solution. So the journey should start a little further, little well in advance. And what we think is very obvious when we present, and that's where the legal team comes to our rescue. They are our allies in this, that what we feel is too obvious, uh, and we present it to them, they have a knack for it. So they are the experts in this field, and what they will help us identify is whether we have kind of aggregated a lot of ideas into one patent. They'll tell us that, it has happened with me. Like they can tell me that these are separately qualifying for an invention, so you don't need to kind of combine them together. They on its own, in individuality, they count for a particular patent. Okay, so next comes is that what we can actually work on so that that is counted as an innovation is, for example, and we can start right from the way we get the training data. So there could be in the training data the way you're working and collecting a data. So I can give an example. For example, I've worked with 12 and 15 or 20 of the files, and the data is the signal which I need to give to the model is spread in multiple places, and there needs to be an expertise or domain knowledge that is needed to combine the data together. There are multiple logics then built on top of them, which is non-trivial. And out of entire hefty process, do you get the entire the training data which goes to the algorithm. So this is something that can also qualify as your invention. If you have a high dimensionality in the data, how do you compress the signal and pass it to the model? How do you represent your feature state? If you have, so people believe that the more data you have, the better it is. So how do you extract good signal also constitutes as invention. So these things are not something ready-made available most of the time. They won't serve you the purpose. These can be your secret sauce also. These are the ways then when you start joining the dots and connect together, you can, for example, explain how these feature. So in a output of the particular algorithm, how do you even identify which features are making importance, are having an importance in explaining your predictions? So explainability component. And the best way is to start the most downstream. Like people believe it should be upstream. I believe is towards the downstream. The moment you're giving your output predictions, right? if you're able to explain them, it's well and good. If not, then you have to do a lot much work going backward in each step of your solution design, where you need to find out how you can simplify it further to explain your prediction. So that will again take you a lot of work, which can be a innovation component in on its own.
So the
uh,
explainability part, so we I know that there's a you are an advocate for AI for good, and we are having a lot of stress on privacy, fairness, ethics, and the explainability, interpretability part of it. So you are telling that from the features, if we find out that there are explainable components, that can be also be patentable, is it?
Yes, yes, exactly. Yes, definitely. And I think I've seen that people more often they resort to SHAP and line. And how do you even identify which framework is working right for you, right? Not everything which is available is working for you. Then how do you even go back and identify in the projects that you're doing that my prediction mainly is coming from this? Like I can give you a very simple example that, for example, you have the actuals and you have the predictions. Now you don't need to do anything. You just need to learn that functional form which with which your predictions are coming. So when you've learned that and you have the, so basically actually there's a lot of confusion between that association learning, the causation and the correlation. What sometimes we are after is the understanding the cause of the prediction. If I am getting a particular output, what caused that output? It's not, even with the frameworks that we have today, it's not very easy to explain those predictions. And that is the ask. Like I can give you the predictions, I know I have a particular deterministic way of coming out of it. Maybe you can just say that I'm applying some layer of noise on top of it, but what I want to understand is how am I arriving at a prediction. So with the kind of deep networks that we have to resort to work to, because there is no better substitute for it for this in more often times, then explainability component also is very important and it can contribute to innovation. And Shamisha, just one more thing. So it just doesn't end there. Like even after you have the predictions, how you present your output is also important. Like even that can come as invention. And I can, give a very simple example. If there is some metric with which you're defining your algorithm success, like I can tell that, uh, this is how I'm going to evaluate my algorithm. And maybe it could be F1 score, precision recall, all those things that exist. But the particular way with which I need to explain the efficacy of my algorithm is not already present, then I need to scheme it out. And the way I designed that metric itself can constitute for innovation. So these are something which look very obvious, but until you drill down to that, won't be feeling like it's patentable. Yeah.
Yeah, so even a feature transformation, using two features to transform into another feature, and that is helping my model explainability. That is a patentable component, right?
Yes, and feature compression also, like the way you say that I am dealing with a large set of data set, like there are a lot of features in, and I don't know which feature is important. I need to devise a way for my business problem that these are the features they are contributing to good signal. How to make sure they are only present, and for them also maybe I need to bring them down to some lower dimension and then feed it to the algorithm. So these are also constitute as the invention.
Yeah, and anything you would like to stress on the pipeline building, like data ingestion? How do we structure our pipelines? The governance part of it. How do we monitor? So how can we identify components that are patentable from this scope?
Yeah. So from governance perspective, I can say one processes as such or something which is acting as a guideline does not constitute. What can in terms of pipeline, the workflow itself can be novel. So the workflow with which you are explaining, or maybe the UI with which you are presenting the output. Like for example, you can say this is how the solution looks like before you apply some algorithm on it. On top of it, if you work something, then there is a user interaction. Then based on what is the input that user selects, your algorithm works behind the scenes, and what kind of output does it give, and this whole feedback structure, right, till the time you reach to an optimal solution. These kind of workflows also constitute as patentable material.
Okay, so can we patent an algorithm itself, or the steps of the algorithm, or is it like some unique part of it? We have to be very drilled down to the optimizer. If you have done something on the optimization part, that has to be patentable. Can you
Yes.
give me, yeah, can you give me more highlight on those
Yeah.
perspectives?
Just a minute. Yeah. So on algorithm side, it could be that there is something which already exists. So I'll just give a brief definition of Shamishta what can constitutes among patents. And because all that we are discussing today, I have not worked on all the spheres of those inventions. Like my inventions have been towards a particular side of supply chain, and more of it is something where the legal team comes to the picture and they know that And before that also, like there is a review committee in each organization. They decide whether it qualifies or not. Like I think that it is a patentable material, but the leadership in the org might not believe so. or they think that this is not going to add much value. So it goes through a lot of layer after that, but I can tell that it has to be novel, and a person with a decent knowledge in that field, if that person doesn't know it, then also it qualifies. So it has a component of invention in itself. It and it cannot be something which is by law of nature, some mathematics and some kind of something which is like deep neural network. It's a
Yes.
mathematical computation, which is very obvious, it cannot qualify. But within an algorithm, if I have a step which maybe something which already exists and I've added a step overlaying on it, because of which I can say maybe the compute increased, like I'm able to run it very faster, or maybe the metrics that are tied to the business, they are driven up because of this particular step. If I have to explain it, if I can explain it, I have a workflow around it, I can give a schematic diagrammatic presentation of it, then it qualifies. Like even a small component of an algorithm also qualifies for invention.
Okay, that's really great to hear. Means actually, I am also not aware of the AI things, how that can be patentable. So this gives insight. Okay, do you want to highlight any use case which you have used somewhere or you have read about it that that explains a detailed AI workflow and that give an example and understand, help us to understand that was patentable or something? Yeah, based on your experience, any use case.
Yeah, so Mr. Actually, the thing that I've worked on, that is actually undergoing a process. So, but like I mentioned, I read a lot of research papers. There is
Yeah,
one that
yeah,
I
yeah,
read
yeah.
recently.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Can I
So,
share that?
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
You can put it in the link. I will post it for the viewers.
Yeah. So, okay. I have shared the link in the chat box. So basically, and my personal interest is more inclined towards the medical field, and I think I'm more gravitated towards it because since the COVID era, what we have seen is that we have a lot of data, and we want some way to understand it faster and come up with medical solutions more quickly. And that's where I believe that AI has a lot of scope to contribute in such kind of advancement. There is one talk mid this year that I've given, and that's the next part of it. The research paper that I've shared here is that, and while we go through this research paper, like I'll give a brief on this in our conversation, and when people go back and kind of read through it, just reading through this research paper also helps you sharpen that mindset, that how that person actually identified this thing. So basically, how the research paper opens up is that it tells you the limitation of what already exists, and what exists is that it's going to compare your associative learning method with a counterfactual learning method. And once they have done the identification, the reasoning that they're, and they give the reason also. They give the reason that in the medical field, like a typical clinical doctor, the way they assess a particular case is very diagnostic basis, and there the problem of causation versus correlation becomes very difficult, and the way you use associative learning, you end up getting to a suboptimal solution. So when the research paper actually gives you a background on this, it then tells you that what is the proposed approach they are going to follow, and what is the edge that approach has. It's a causal diagnosis, where that's how the doctors are taking the decision, and on top of that they're having a counterfactual algorithms. So there are two, I guess, theorems which they have explained in the research paper. Or maybe I can explain. If you want to bring up the screen, can you do that, Sharmishta? Like, or if we want to talk in detail on the
Yeah, yeah.
research paper.
Go. Yeah. Do you want me to share screen or you want to share screen? You can go ahead.
Yeah, I think you can share screen because I'm just navigating through this. It will be easy for me.
Yeah. Let the viewers go through this. I've shared the link.
Yeah,
Yeah. Better than sharing screen. Let's make the things easily
yeah.
identifiable so that people can understand. Yeah.
Sure. Then I can just summarize it, and then
Yeah. Yeah.
once
Yeah. Yeah.
everyone
Yeah.
need to
Yeah.
read it, it would become easy. The reason is that first is understanding what exists, and how that existing algorithm is not sufficient for the problem statement at hand, and that's the difference between the That's where the confounding variables and the impact that they have very well shown with an example. After that, there are a couple of theorems which is counterfactual that they are showing. Basically, the which all so if you have a certain symptoms, what would be the underlying disease? That's the intent of that's what this research paper is actually capturing. So how do you make sure that if you intervene into this phenomena, what exactly changes due to which you can say the symptoms are now changing? So that intervention is actually counted as the treatment, the cure for that particular disease. And there are a way that using Bayesian network, it explains how a disease D can directly lead to can be, because of a particular underlying symptoms, and such symptoms is what you observe, and disease is what you need to basically diagnose. So when they do that, these are the steps and these are the steps that they have done, and I won't say that what they have done actually qualifies or not, but what we end up doing is these additional steps, those theorems with which we are evaluating our algorithm, they count as invention. And the next step is, how do you even validate your solution? So validation, like I mentioned, constitutes invention. And data preparation, the data validation, like they mentioned, that they actually curated the data with the help of the doctors, because the data that already exists, you don't know whether those diagnoses were correct or not in the first place, right? Because there is mislabeling that can happen, and because of which you are not correctly validating your data. So the way you're inferencing your algorithm also constitutes as an innovation. That's what the second part of this research paper shows. And the last is like, how do you present the results? And that's again very important. Like you can say that how many times the disease that is actually that the patient is actually undergoing, it's captured in the top five basically. So you have a rank order of disease, and then the top one is basically, you can say, is the actual disease that the person is having. So there are multiple beautiful ways in which they have represented the outcome also, and that's how we understand the efficacy of our algorithm. And all these tests taken together can help us understand that if we are actually faced with certain problem, how would we approach it? So data science, like you say, is an art, and art lies in designing this approach, right? So that approach building is what I'm saying is happens mostly with the research papers. So if people would like to go through it and have any follow-up questions, I'd be happy to take.
Yeah. So let's see if viewers have the questions, they can free to ask you. And
Hmm.
one of the most important things which I have come across deployments, wearing algorithms, pipelines, is like sometimes we prepare a custom tool, right, to monitor
Hmm.
our models, or like a shapely kind of a thing, if we can interpret our models, or we design our to load test our models, ML models. So are these tools can also be patented?
Custom tools which are not available as such in public
Yeah,
domain.
yeah, we design our own tool, and we make it available. Like say, put it in open source, or we don't put it in. It's but our solution is there. Like we know how we have designed a open source tool. So is
Hmm.
that also be can that also be patentable?
Yeah, I think that's a little more legal question. I think the folks can answer. There are some copyright issues. Like if you open source, there are multiple licenses under which you can publish in public forum. And when you're actually making it public, and then I think with licenses, you kind of free up that person can either just code the source and free to use something of that sort. But the whole idea of patenting and the cost that we spend in terms of it is to have an edge basically. So the trade secret, I can say, or the secret sauce recipes on which which is very specific to a company and the technology they are working on, generally that's the reason they would spend so much money, that they don't really want to share it out in public. So
Yeah,
that's a
yeah,
little.
yeah, for loyalty and all. So what are the
Yeah.
steps? First, we have to find a non-provisional, then a provisional. So can you guide the steps? If you have a legal department in our organization, what are the steps to file a patent?
Yeah, sure. So actually, what happens is like once you have culminated an idea and you think that that is patent worthy, in the meantime that so just you can start with an idea stage itself. You have to share it with your manager, the team, and there is a before you even go to the legal team, there is a review committee. They kind of understand your idea, and that's where when they approve of it, and you have a working version of it. So it should not be just an abstract idea saying that I think this would work. Your thinking is not going to help here. So if you are able to prove and benchmark it in some ways and prove the why part of it to the company, that why they think they should spend your money on your patent or your idea, then it goes to then the legal counselors come into the picture. You kind of explain to them in a disclosure form all the technicalities, even the minor details are also captured there, and we don't need to be really bothered about it because the people who draft these patents, they've been doing it for years. They know what exact details they want, and that's how they kind of take entire information from you. You are asked to do some signature which says that I know in my knowledge that this work doesn't exist, and this is true to my knowledge, and this is in a novel idea, and then they take it, and that's where they file the provisional. And the day they do the filing, I think it on an average it takes 4 to 5 years for you to get a patent granted.
Okay, so long.
Yeah.
So is there organization which are right? If I join a say an organization which encourages patenting, can this be speeded up, or can the process happen more fast? So can I get it granted within 2 to 3 years if I can join some organizations which encourages patenting?
Yeah, so I think Sharishta, actually, this differs country by country. There is a European
Okay.
patent office as well. The one that I filed is in the US. So there, at least I know the process of, and I think this is quite systematic. I don't believe that any organization would be having an edge that they can expedite it.
Okay,
And you
okay.
won't believe, I think I read while reading on patents also, I saw somewhere that from 2009 to 2019, there has been a steep increase in the number of patent requests that the USPTO has received, and it is all piled up because of the big pipeline that they're going through. Is the reason that this process takes a lot of time. So
Okay, and I have also seen when I patented solutions, right? There are questions coming back from the attorney, like
yes.
so how there are rejections. This claim is not accepted. This is been seen in another claim of another person who has filed a patent. So, what is
Hmm.
the right way to defend the claims? Have you ever
Yeah.
got a chance to defend the claims? So, how do we do that? What is the best practice, or what do you suggest as an expert?
Yeah, I think very first thing, Sharmishta, is to be honest with yourself. If you know somewhere that there is something that is existing and you kind of still pushed it because of a personal bias, that is wrong, because a lot of stakes are there from the organization side. It's the reputation also at stake. If you are clear, then you have already done that kind of homework. So actually, like I mentioned in the patent review committee also, you are asked, like, you have to explain that similar work or similar ideation is already there or not, and what is the closest, I think prior artwork is how they call it. Is there a prior artwork which is similar to this? And you have to give a disclosure at that time if you are aware of something, and then kind of give a difference also. So how do you think that is different? So with attorney, like the experience I've had so far is like they've come back with follow-up questions just to ask more of a clarity, like we want to kind of bring it out more nicely, or maybe this can be explained in a much better way, or there is more that you want to give a supporting statements on it towards. And on top of it, you just don't say that this is working for my problem statement. They also ask you like what are the other areas that they can emphasize the patent office and the filing that they are doing, that not just this, it's applicable on these and these areas also. So these kind of corner information also is what they'll ask you. And on top of that, so these are again follow-up questions to get more clarity, but I've not had a chance where they're saying that it's getting rejected. And so if it has to happen, it will happen. And uh, what maximum we as a patenter can do is like provide the details and explanation as much as possible, because at the time of filing I knew that this didn't exist, and where exactly the gap is that I'm filling or my invention is filling is something that only I as a developer know. So I can provide maximum of the knowledge. And yeah, if they reject it, there is some reasoning maybe they'll give. And uh, that's the maximum I think we can do.
Yeah, so coming from industry perspective, like say if I'm thinking that I have done something on the supply chain, and then can I model the same patent? Can I remodel a part of it and put it in a different domain, or is it the conflict will come in that a same patent exists in your name, but I am changing a part of it and adding a little bit component to it and putting it in some other industry domain? Can this be done?
Yeah, so actually that comes into the zone of subjectivity. So even if we are thorough that I know that something existed, if you just change the domain, I think it doesn't qualify. I believe it doesn't qualify. But if you just
It
add
doesn't
some,
qualify.
yeah, if you add something on top of it, then how the degree of difference, right? The degree of addition that you have done is something that you need to explain to the attorney, and then they will decide. And then when they'll file, they'll be asked certain set of follow-up questions. So that needs to be justified. So even in this entire patent process, agnostic to the country is also, Shamishta, this is something which is not very clear. It's very obscured process. Like there are
Obscure
no clear
process. Yeah.
guidelines. There are no clear
Guidelines.
guidelines.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the maximum that we can do is to make sure that we are providing a clear explanation of how we have identified the gap, and how other things are the things that are presently available are not filling up for it. So that's the only clarity we can have from our side, and anything that goes thereafter is something which goes into the domain of subjectivity.
Okay, that's really great to hear. And suppose some young buddies like data scientists who are directly emerging into this field. So, what would you advise them for having a technical? Of course, they have a technical bent of mind, and people are super intelligent. Also, the next generation which are coming up, I think they are much more smarter than us. So, what is your advice that if they want to really build a patent portfolio, right? What is your advice they should do? Apart from reading research papers, how they should come to conclusion that I am really good in this field, I should make contributions for the entire community and or my organization, and how I start filing the take part in the patenting process. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think Sharmishta, there's very clear answer on this from my side. Like I have not done any formal education, and whatever learning I've developed over the years is based on the work that I've done with some of the AI/ML veterans. And I can frankly mention that in the first initial years, I used to just observe how people are actually approaching a problem statement, and I never used to ask follow-up questions. I used to just go back and backtrace and reverse engineer what made them think approach a problem like this. So just, and I believe that things have changed a lot since then, because now there is a lot more information available, a lot more talks happen where people explain their approach and the problem statement, and the way we are using Kaggle also is very explicit enough, how you can do like how you can solve a particular problem statement. But by far what has worked for me is the kind of shadowing and the teamwork and the peer learning that you develop by getting into deep technical discussions with the folks that you work around. And that's how you understand the nuances of it. Like, it's all about initial years, it's all about building the intuition. Tools, packages, software, languages, they are just a medium for us to get from to attain a particular business objective. How to even approach that? There are multiple ways you can do that. If you are following or maybe you're working with somebody who's been into the industry for maybe at least 4 or 5 years, I would say, then you understand that without even wasting time in implementing multiple things. You can't just implement multiple things, because time is also of essence. You just, with the intuition that you've developed, you know that because this particular algorithm has this assumption, and it has these pros and cons, and these are the limitations. I know that this particular problem statement cannot be definitely solved in a particular in this using this algorithm. So you start filtering out those things. So if somebody has to actually think that they want to they are relatively new, I would say that initially, by the time you are uh, approaching a patent, just do the groundwork of observing how others do. That's the first thing. And other thing is that maybe already enough material is available and you think that you're actually contributing to patent, because in data science, actually the you can't say that you have to gain enough experience. Enough is never enough. There is so much of depth in the field, and the breadth also you need to capture. You cannot, even today also, I cannot say that I know all of it.
All
There
of
is
it.
still so much that exists outside my knowledge, and I'm learning day in day out, right? So one thing, and everything comes down to this, that you approach a particular thing, like have some objective in mind and work towards it, but don't make it your only thing. Like, understanding and enjoying the journey is important. You'll quickly become agitated, and if it is, you think that it is working, for others it is not working, there is a gap, and you feel like it's a lot of iteration, and why others are not understanding the way you think it is innovative or not. So don't get frustrated during the process, because data science in itself is a huge research work, right? So
Mhm.
have an objective in mind, that I want to contribute to patent, and I think I have a patentable material, but don't just rush into it. So there are reasons why the leaders and the people who are into the industry, if they are kind of rejecting something, or they think that something exists, or there needs to be some addition to it, definitely feedback matters a lot. But there is a reason they suggest that thing. So this is what I've learned so far. Like, staying and observing adds a lot of value in this field.
Great, great, absolutely great insights. Means I think people who are already watching or will watch the videos will uh, should get extra into and should be driven towards patenting solutions to build their own creative, to structure their creative ideas and find places in the innovative community, right? In the data science community, more innovation should come up. Thanks for a wonderful insight. And Vidhi, like. What do you think that there are so much, I feel that reinforcement learning, robotics, IoT, these are new budding fields. Don't you think that the scope of patenting is a lot more, and people who are coming onto the space in the field of machine learning should give more extra attention to some of the emerging fields, like
Hmm.
AI, for ethical AI for good, and this all these things there, which may have wider scope for patenting. What is your thoughts and takeaways on this? What are your
Yeah,
thoughts?
yeah. Actually, Shamishta, like, I'm a person who likes to simplify things, right? So I'm a person who would say that I have a knack of identifying gaps in simplest thing possible, where people think that, okay, that was maybe not a scope of it,
Not a
and I can
scope.
say,
Mhm.
yeah. So I think start simple. It looks very fancy when you talk about big terms and all, and but then the responsibility comes equally well. Like, you need to be very much aware of the field. Like, reinforcement learning in itself, I've worked on it. Getting the algorithm to converge itself was getting so difficult. How do you know the state transition transition matrix that you've designed is correct, and getting the particular thing to work and productionize, and seeing the output of it and validating it itself is a bigger problem. It's very painful thing and just doesn't work overnight. So if it requires a lot of patience, I would say that, and it can come from any sphere. So just start simple, and I'll give one very beautiful example. And I think earlier this year I was giving a talk at one place about privacy and why it is important. And there was a lady who came up, and the audience was of all size up. Like, she was not a data scientist, and she came up, and I think she was a librarian. And she came up and she said that, I think we should do something in my field and all. And she had her own views also, and that was so beautiful that she wanted to do some analysis around she increasing the footfall in the library. So that I found is very innovative, right? How to increase the footfall? You can do n number of things. And then I started giving her some guidelines, and I realized that yes, I didn't even think in that direction, and it sounded so simple. How do you know? Exploration and exploitation phase, right? You are just exploiting, like, who are the people who tend to visit the library the most, and what is the age group of those people, and within those age group of people, who are the people who read a particular genre of books more, and then the resource allocation is what you can put into use for particular library setup, right? And in the exploration, if you want to go, you can see that what is the minority class which is coming, but it's coming in a smaller proportion. What are their interest area? How can I increase that? So innovation can come from unexpected areas. So buzzwords and all are important, and I think, yeah, definitely the scope increases, like you mentioned, it widens a lot. Start simple, think around, think and look around, like wherever you think there could be very small cases, like you mentioned about ethical AI. So AI for sustainability and climate change, if people want to do so, if you have a vision, you have a goal, you will find your ways around. I've seen people saying that we don't know where exactly is the data which we can work on. Data, most of the time, I think, even Shamishta, is a problem in data science. Like, it's a chicken and egg problem. You want to do something, unless you prove an idea, nobody will help sponsor you the data. Data generally for these things are not easily available. So how would you do that? So these actually constitute, and they have a lot of scope for innovation. So the field that you mentioned, and apart from that, sustainability and the environmental uh, uh, stability that is important.
Okay, that's really great to hear. And what do you think the role of active learning that is going to come with human intervention? You were talking about that there's intervention required, right? You stressed on the factors again and again. So
Hmm.
how do you think that the intervention factors can be improved, or people should know about these other resources or for active learning where they should concentrate on? So one domain I can clearly relate to is healthcare, where active there's if you just get the data and get going, it's not going to work. You have to have get feedbacks from doctors, nurses, and how the patient is performing. So what do you
Yes.
think the scope of active learning in as general, and then of course from the scope of patenting solutions?
Yes, actually, it's a lot, and I have an example also on this. And active learning is very important and very, very critical in the high stake decisions. Where, for example, in healthcare, the one that you mentioned, right? I remember in one of the conferences, this question was asked that if there is a robot versus a doctor doing a surgery, there is a 2% failure that a robot does a surgery versus 15% failure rate coming from a doctor assisted surgery. Whom would a person choose, right? So just looking at this, you would assume that 2% is less than 15%, and that's going to be more accurate in terms of mortality rate, and I'll choose robotic surgery. Then they started giving little more context about it. With robot surgery, these 2% and 15%, you don't even know how these numbers are calculated, right? And what is the sample of population of data that on basis on which this 2% number has been arrived at. And on top of that is active learning, the human intervention that you mentioned, right? So they say that, whenever these critical decisions come, so they don't even know if in real time they can explain as they can do to a doctor. And these are the issues that mark that, when is the assistance required. That's where it calls for a place that in most of the places, before even we go down that path, can we have AI at least in these critical fields as an assistance. So you can say that, I have a certain set of rules. It's doing the analysis, and it's giving doctors a set of lists based on which a doctor can actually take an action. So you can totally go to the extreme end of the spectrum also, and use AI for acting as an ally for you, as an aid to the analysis that you are doing, rather than giving the entire control of the situation, or maybe for the surgery for that matter, right? In those analysis to the AI in its entirety.
Okay, that's great. And do you think that organizations, as we mature in the field of data science with active learning, reinforcement learning, and a lot of things are coming up, ethics is going to be one of the most important components in coming years. So, do you think there is a lot of scope of innovation, and organizations should also sponsor for patenting, or maybe if there is any scope for getting associated with government universities and who can support patenting, because it's a huge cost. So that is what is worrying me. If people don't get associated with the right set of organization, there is no scope that they can blossom. So yeah, anything other than that they can do to enable their creativity.
As in the organizations, I think I didn't get the question. So yours
Yeah,
was?
either in the organizations should more promote patenting, or maybe individuals who are creative, they can get associated with any creative bodies, or who can sponsor patenting. So any government bodies or anything is available, like DRDO, or anybody would take in ideas, or you have to be in part of an organization.
Yeah, definitely. I think it must not be necessary. Like I have not done outside organization, like in the corporate culture I've worked, so I'm not aware of it. But I think yeah, definitely it's not restricted to that. And in terms of organizations, I think I can say that I have worked with 5 or 6 organizations, and I found only one that is very active in the field of patenting. So because I think the primary reason is the cost involved is very high, and there needs to be a very solid reasoning why you are going down the patent path, right? So other than that, if patenting has a particular reason, like I can say that there is something which I really don't want others to work on in the meantime, and I want to secure the rights for it, right? And maybe I'll decide when I give or pass on the particular rights to.
Rights.
So
Yeah, I
there
want
are
to preserve the rights. Yeah.
exactly. And there are organizations who are doing CSR work, I can say, but I don't believe that patenting would constitute as one of it. Like I've heard of Microsoft doing a particular CSR project where they were able to design a solution, or maybe I think sponsor or help in a solution which was able to save ocean and marine life. So as part of these projects, they're able to contribute to the society, but uh, and this is a hefty cost that they have to pay while helping somebody procure a patent. So I think that would not constitute under it. So
Yeah.
even if there are multiple organizations who would be non-profit and helping people for that, I might not be aware of it, but the businesses, I think they are not doing it. Yeah.
Mm. Anything you would like to highlight on best practices of scaling AI solutions? We have talked about algorithms, pipelines. We have talked about patenting different components. That only part what I think is missing is the productionization and scaling. So, any best practices or guidelines you would like to give it to the viewers?
Yeah, I think one of the first thing that comes to my mind is, because I'm coming from the ethical use of AI framework and all those things that I've run, is the robustness and reliability of the model. How robust is my model? So when we scale up our solution, we put our model into production and it's been deployed. It is exposed to all kind of data sets, that all kind of change characteristics in the data that is incoming. Is it robust enough to handle those future changes, scope of feedback? And for example, in the recent times, we are seeing that because of the COVID era, a lot of things have changed. So is it reliable enough that I can incorporate that as a feedback and my model will still work? Data itself is a problem. Like some again, the assumption is the more data it is, and the better the learning happens. So if do we have enough data to train our model? So you can definitely propose a solution saying, I've worked on a pilot project. This was a limited data I worked on. But when you work at scale, you need to make sure that you have decently labeled enough trained data. And one more thing is the data, at least in data science, I can definitely say that it's because there are a lot of teams involved in it. You have engineering, DevOps, and the data science teams themselves, and there is data quality team as well. So you need to there are a lot of things that can go wrong if the communication is not right. You need to have a standard process when you take your model to production, and the best way that you can do is like between multiple teams involved, the communication has to be more effective, more comprehensive, and you have to have guidelines. Like every time a certain thing is happening, you're giving a handover, you need to make sure that it's very well communicated and monitored also. And when it comes to multiple tech stacks, doing a feasibility analysis of what should work and how do we even standardize it is again a very key component while productionizing. And once your model has gone into production, how do you monitor your model? So model monitoring and maintenance is a big chunk of
Another
work on its
session.
own, right? Yeah. So is your model performance stable while you were monitoring it in staging before putting into production? How do you interpret the output coming out of your pipelines? And there are multiple checks that need to be put in place. So these are various, and I would say that this is still a very small section of the spectrum of work that involves when your model goes into production, but they constitute the most of it.
Yeah. Thanks, Vidhi. We have covered all the different sections, I think, right from model feature engineering, model building, putting it, building the pipeline, scaling it, and of course, the most important important part of today's discussion is the patenting. So, any advice we have given also advice to people who are budding data scientists and will be the next generation innovators. So, any advice specific to women? We see women are lags in these fields, like less women representation. So, any advice for women in general?
Yeah, I think self-doubt. Self-doubt is the killer here. Always, and I can tell you with, I think, 100% of the time, Shamishta, that I've talked to women, the problem is that they think that what they're doing is not enough, or what they know is not enough. Like, leave aside being in the corporate culture, before even applying for a job, they think that they need to know n number of things before even appearing for an interview. So I've been recently associated as part of mentoring some of the women folks, and that is where I kind of pushed them multiple times, saying that at least give a go, maybe. And you cannot just go with the job description. Everybody, like, I've seen and I've read a case study also where it says that if a male candidate goes for a
Yeah.
job description, looks at a job description and goes, he says that, okay, even if I know 50%, I'll appear for it. And the woman says, see, I only know 80%, that 20% I don't know, and I'll not even appear for an interview. So I think that's the bigger problem, that we are so much caught up in the, I would say, perfection, the world of perfection, that if I have not covered my syllabus 100%, I think I'm not good for the exam, kind of thing. So just go past that. The moment you get into the job, you would realize that not all that they were asking in the interviews or maybe in the job description is something that you have to be already aware of or knowing, and they'll expect you from day one. And these days there is a lot of grooming that women are receiving in the organizations, and a lot of support, I would say, from the men allies also. So if we are just past that self-inflicted fear, self-doubt, I'm not enough, I think they'll do it absolutely fantastic. And primary reason is that, I should not say we women, I should not generalize it, but I've seen women are great multitaskers. So they can do anything with, with the very high degree of discipline. So so they should not feel because they're the primary people who are mostly responsible for the family and other things, they are not as good in the corporate world. So that's
Yeah,
it.
thanks for your encouraging words. I think many women should get inspired looking at you and become innovators in the future generation. Yeah, thanks, Vidhi. We are almost done. I think if you want to add anything, please feel free to add. Otherwise, we can end this conversation. It was a pleasure hosting you, and I'm lucky to have your time on a Saturday morning. And hope it has helped the viewers. Anything you would
Yeah,
like to
Samishta, I have.
anything you would like to add, or we have
No, Sharmishta, I think we have covered quite a bit, and I think that, I believe and I hope that it would be helpful for the people who are watching us. One thing maybe that I can add is that, if still there are some people who think there are certain questions that they would not want to ask and they could not during the session, they can reach me offline through LinkedIn. I'll be happy to attend, and it's been a pleasure discussing all things data science with you over this last 1 hour, Sharmishta. So it's a good time that I had with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. Let's end the broadcast.